Good morning, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Infla. I am your host, Dr. Infla Chester. You know what I like to do on the show. I want to enlighten you. I want to inspire you. I want to empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want to get you fired up about the miracles of Jesus. My guest today is Reverend Devin Miller, and I want to tell you a little bit more about him. Pastor Miller is the founder and teacher of Clear Faith Christian Ministries, the virtual church, which is a teaching ministry on YouTube and Facebook weekly. He is also the creator and lead counsel for Clear Faith Christian Counseling, Consulting, and Coaching Services. Now, you know what I am going to say. Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Good morning, Reverend Miller. Thank you so much for being on with me today.
Good morning, Doctor. How are you?
I am well. I love the title of the book, The Miracles of Jesus. I think that is awesome and that we should be reminded of them daily. But before we get into your book, I want to talk a little bit more about what makes you you. So what makes Reverend Miller Devin? What makes you you? What has gotten you to this point in your life that you feel have really been eye-opening moments, life-changing moments, those moments that have created you into Pastor Miller?
Well, I'm a product of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, born and raised, moved to Minnesota to go to college. I've graduated from University of Minnesota. I also have a master's in divinity as well as a master's in Christian leadership. So what makes me me really at the end of the day is my love for God and my love for people. My education is such that I'm able to help people kind of find their way through God if that's where they want to go. And if not, culturally try to find themselves so that, as you have said, we try to be the best of ourselves in all that we do. Been in ministry for 31 years, duly aligned with the Baptist faith as well as the Church of God in Christ. Our ministry, however, is non-denominational because we believe that denominations and quote-unquote religion is a way to get to God. But once you are with God, all you need to do is read his word because that's his way of talking to you. And so that's why we are strictly a Bible teaching ministry.
I love that. I'm so glad that you mentioned that for anyone that would have any questions about it. Now, as a pastoral counselor, I love the fact that you are doing counseling. So please tell me more about Clear Faith Christian Counseling, Consulting, and Coaching Services.
Sure. We're located, of course, in Texas, but we are 90% virtual counseling as well. So we receive most of our clientele from many sources. But our process is to help couples, no matter what type of relationship they're in, be it marriage, premarital, boyfriend, girlfriend, engaged, whatever it is, whatever they feel that they need counseling and are referred to us, we help them to stand in their truth, speak with their voice, learn how to listen to understand and not always to respond, and then to be the best that they can be so that the relationship can be the best that it can be.
Yeah. I love that. Now, if someone says, that sounds really good, and that sounds like something that I want to be able to utilize. However, two sides of the coin. One, I'm not necessarily a practicing Christian. I haven't been to church since I was a little kid. Can I still come? Flip side of the coin, I'm in an interfaith relationship. Can you help us as well?
Oh, yeah. We don't, Christianity, for lack of a better word, is the lens by which we look through, but it's not the Bible that we beat you with. So my approach to counseling is really conversation, and that is really the tenets of how Christ did what he did. He did not, because he was the Word, he didn't beat people with the Word. He just talked to them. And that's basically what we do, is we talk to people and help them come up with the best solution for their lives. And, hence the word, we want them to be clear on where they're going with their relationship by being clear on who they are.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for that, because someone needed to hear that. For so many people, they're afraid to go to counseling for one reason or another, or they're afraid to get into a church situation, or even faith-based counseling. They're afraid that they're going to be beaten up by the word. So thank you for that clarification. Now, being an author, is that something that you always wanted to do, or did you feel that that was just where you were being directed to go to next?
Well, Doctor, it really happened again through a conversation. I was talking when I was living in Minnesota with one of my mentors, and we were just talking about issues that are facing the church, and how the church has become disconnected with community. And my ministry has always been one where whatever church I was affiliated with or working with, I tried to engage the community to come through the church. And so he basically asked me, he said, why don't you write about it? And I said, man, I'm not no writer. I just talk to folks, and he was like, well, you can do one or two things. You can either write a book or start a lecture series. So I said, let me try the book first. And through the book, we would try a lecture series. And so that's kind of where the book came, the thought of the book came from. It wasn't the first book that I tried. I have another book that I was actually going to do an autobiography. But I figured that my life wasn't over yet, so I didn't have time to keep writing each extra chapter every time something came up. I said that book would be like War and Peace. So I said, let me stop that. And I looked at the miracles that Christ performed in the Word and noticed that all that he did was in community. And so the miracles of Jesus, the process for community building through kingdom expansion. And it's a blueprint for churches to re-engage, reignite, revive, and reform their processes to become more a part of the community where they are placed. So I took I'm sorry?
No, I was saying, like that's really good. Yeah, most definitely. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I took the miracles, the 34 to 35 miracles that Christ performed, and rewrote them from a community building perspective. So, for example, when you look at him going, and I always use the feeding of the 5,000, which everybody knows, no matter what faith you belong to. The concept was, first of all, he was in the community. Second of all, it was a problem within the people that had to be met by the leadership. The leader then looked amongst themselves and said, what are we to do? You had old guard that said, just send them home. You had new guard, which was Christ, that says, no, look amongst them and see what they have, which says to any community leader, the answer to any problem in a community is within the community. And then finally, when he found the two fish and 5 loaves, once it was brought to the leader, it was multiplied so that no one was without. And in fact, they took more than what they brought. The analogy there is that when you bring it to leadership that has community in mind, the community will not only embrace the idea, but they will multiply the idea amongst themselves so that they can go home richer than when they came.
Amen to that. That is such a beautiful way to explain that. And I can just see some listener going, yes, that's the answer. that is the answer. That is the missing link that we've been looking for. My question to you is that, do you think that so many times ministries, churches, individuals that are trying to help, do you think that their problem is that they don't go to community? They don't ask the community what they need, but instead they find themselves telling the community that what I have is what you need.
Most definitely. Most
Mhm.
definitely. I mean, I think, churches have become insulated and isolated instead of engaging.
Mhm.
And they've taken the adage of saying, whosoever will, let him come. But they forget that the Great Commission says, go ye therefore. And
Mhm.
so when you get that disconnect, then you become a social club and you become membership has its privileges.
Mhm.
When the kingdom has the only privilege that you have is eternal life, and everything else is a blessing that is given from the one who is going to give you life. And so I believe that the church has forgotten that its main purpose is to affect and infect the community by which it's been placed. And even if there's multiple churches in a given area, it is still the same mandate, which means if we are true kingdom, then we are to embrace one another,
Mhm.
and we are to work together for the sake of the community, and it's not competition. But unfortunately, because
Right.
of and this is where I get very controversial, because there is still a slave mentality
Mhm.
within the church,
Mhm.
where the pastor feels he has to be the be all end all as opposed to be the navigator of all.
Mhm.
Then we have a problem of pastors wanting everything and the people are to give versus the pastors to give everything and the people are supposed to be blessed.
Mm-mm. I love that. Well, I will leave that right there so people can roll that around and decide which way they want to take that. But I do find um, I find it to be a challenging question, and I don't mean a negative when I say challenging, but it is something that would cause us to self-reflect, to self-assess, and figure out where are we and how are we interacting not only within our individual churches, but how are we interacting with our communities? Are we being that foot, that hand, that leg? Are we being a member of the body the way that we're supposed to, or are we just doing it, like you said, for self gratification in some way? I love it. Mm-mm-mm. Now that's a whole nother show for a whole different day, and we could definitely come back and we could talk about that, right? And I'm hearing someone saying, yes, Dr. Angela, sign him up right now. I hear you. I hear you. Now, we have about a minute or so left, but I want to ask you one more question before we go to break. And that is, do you think that your book is um, is relevant for right now? We are still dealing with a pandemic. The virus is still among us. Is this something that you find that during this time it's appropriate to read now?
Oh, most definitely for two reasons. One is because of the pandemic, we have to learn how to do church differently
Mhm.
to still meet the needs of the people. And then, secondly, because of the unrest, we have to engage the community and let them know that this is a spiritual battle as well as a natural battle. And so I think the book will be able to speak to both because it still shows you how to engage community no
Mhm.
matter what the issue is, based on the miracles that Christ performed.
Mhm. Thank you for adding that additional layer that this is also a spiritual battle during this time. And I think so many times people just have a tendency to look very top layer. They're
Right.
not looking for root cause. They're just
Right.
looking at that one symptom, not really trying to figure out holistically what is wrong and what has caused this to happen. I love it. Well, it is time for us to go to break, but before we do, Pastor, if you could please remind everyone, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
The title of the book is The Miracles of Jesus, The Process for Community Building Through Kingdom Expansion. You can get it at iuniverse.com. That's little I, big U, iuniverse.com. And you can get in touch with me on social media, of course. on Facebook through Devin Miller or through our church, Clear Faith Christian Ministries, COGIC, which is Church of God in Christ. And either way, you can find me there.
I love it. Alrighty, listeners, now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. Hi everyone, Dr. Angela here. Did you know that Daily Spark is now on Facebook? That's right, you can visit with me at facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I want to know more about what you're thinking. I'd love to know which interview did you find the most entertaining or the most informative. I want to talk to you, and I want you to be able to talk to me. Simply visit facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Discovery. No, just a sec.
What would it look like if we listened more? Could the right voice, the right set of words, bring us all just a little closer? Get us to open up? Even push us further? It could, if we took the time to listen. The most inspiring minds, the most compelling stories. Download Audible and listen for a change.
What a crazy year it has been. Anyone out there feeling just a little bit lost right now? Well, no problem. Join me in learning how we can turn fear into confidence that creates cash. I'm a part of a series that helps everyone pivot during these times of uncertainty. Simply visit helpmepivot.com and access this free mastermind that includes not only myself, but international experts sharing their secrets on how to turn this time into a time of opportunity. Simply visit helpmepivot.com.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butch-Sester. My guest today is Reverend Devin Miller, and we are talking to Pastor about his book, The Miracles of Jesus. Now, before we went to break, Pastor, we were talking about how your book is relevant today, be it that the pandemic would be here or wouldn't be here. It's an appropriate read for this time of now. Are you able to, I know you can't give us, everything that's in the book. You do have to buy the book, folks. But Patrick, can you give us some more insights into what your book talks about?
Well, like I said, it's a blueprint for how to Reengage Church, and this is more or less why I wrote the book. When I've worked in many different churches, many different pastors, been in leadership in many different areas, and one of the things that I always found troubling is that we did a whole lot on the inside, trying to change, transform, and treat people the way they should be treated. However, we didn't know how that translated to the broader community. And so you had joblessness in the community, you had drugs in the community, you had crime in the community, you had poor test scores in the schools in the community. But yet in the church, we're talking about scholarship, we're talking about being the best, we're talking about succeeding and things like that. And so starting out as a youth pastor and matriculating through leadership, I always said, how is it that we can talk real good inside, but we don't talk outside? And so it was always my goal with whatever church I worked with was to be that bridge between the church that I was affiliated with and the community. So while I was a youth pastor, I had an organization called the Collaborative Movement for Improvement that worked with African American kids in the school system in St. Paul, Minnesota. So when I was not at the church, I was in the schoolhouse. I was walking through the halls at the high schools. Our program eventually went to a junior high program where we now are walking in the junior highs and the high schools, talking the same thing that we were talking in the church. And it was not a recruiting arm for the church. It was just being the church to recruit to the kingdom. And so, we worked with parents. We worked with social workers with kids that were getting in trouble. We worked with the correctional system when kids were in juvenile detention. We worked with the police department, started an organization co-founded a program called the God Squad, which was considered the bridge between law enforcement and community. And it was just 3 preachers that were walking the community, that knew the community, that the community trusted us, and we were entrusted by the police department. Had we had that now, what we had then, we may not have had a George Floyd. Because I was in St. Paul when all this stuff was going on in Minneapolis. And Minneapolis and St. Paul are called the Twin Cities. And so, with all this uprising and all of this, we were pioneers when we were talking about community policing. And so the book really talks to how Christ in his day walked amongst the people. He met the needs of the people. He used the word to talk about what was going on with the people. You never found him in the temple. Very seldom, I should say, did you find him in the temple. But you found him with the tax collector. You found him with the prostitute. You found him with the least, the left out, and the lonely, showing them and also speaking to them of what the word can do for them. We lost that in the church. And so what you have now is people are crying in the streets saying no justice, no peace. The church tries to come out there and say something. They're like, where you been? Because some of the injustice has come from you. When you ask for tithes and offerings, but we don't see any manifestation of that in our community. We see you drive up in a Bentley, but I'm still driving a hoopty. So why is it that I should come to you now when you haven't been for me then? And that is not the way of Christ. Christ always met the needs of the people. And the interesting thing and the theme of Christ was he always said, don't tell nobody. But he understood that if you tell folks don't tell, what they're going to do? They're going to tell. And that's what we've missed in the church. We're so busy trying to get people to come, but we don't have anything to tell. And so why should I even come to church if you're not giving me nothing when I'm outside the church? And you're saying that the only way I can get to what I need is through the church or in the church, not through the church. And so the book really helps leaders. It helps church leaders. It helps civic leaders. It gives them a blueprint, a common book to look at and say, okay, I hear you coming from a spiritual perspective, but I also hear you coming from a practical perspective, because most social service agencies have a Christian bend. They're doing it because they're trying to meet the needs of the people. But unfortunately, churches don't align themselves with social service agencies. Churches don't align themselves with law enforcement to a certain degree. And so when you talk about unrest, the church is supposed to be the bridge, because whenever there's unrest in the community, the community will either go one way or the other. They'll either go to law enforcement to be protected, or they'll go to the church to be prayed for. And so when you understand the dynamic of your community, then you know how you are to be that bridge. And I think the book really helps all leaders within a community have a common book that they can read from to say, how do we do this?
Such an awesome answer, and I think that you've given such food for thought there. There's something for everyone to nibble on in what you just said, and that is such a powerful statement. And I think that someone now was saying, I need to get a copy of that book just to see where I am. Where do I fit in this scenario? Great answer, Pastor. Now, when you are not ministering, or you're not teaching, when you're not counseling, or just being this civic-minded, faith-inspiring individual, what are you doing?
Sleeping.
I love it. He's like, I need to rest. I need to get some rest.
That's about it. Because there's never a dull moment. I mean,
Never.
I just recently resigned and retired from working in the school district down here in Texas that I was working at for 4 years, and started doing counseling full time by God's grace. And so because of that, I don't have a day that I'm not counseling or ministering to someone. And especially in light of COVID, COVID has caused people to really reevaluate their relationships. There was a post that was out earlier when COVID had just hit, and it said, if your relationship has turned into a tolerationship, you might want to seek help. And that's what's really happened. I mean, my client list jumped probably twofold. People, dealing with, just the pressures of relationships. But they always had an outlet. Think about it. When if you have a significant other and you kind of get into a little rift, you could go to the gym. You could go take a walk, freely. You could go to Starbucks and meet a friend and talk about it. Well, when COVID was heavy, everybody was in the house. And the only place that you could go to find rest and solace was probably the bathroom because it had a lock. But you got your kids at home, you got your husband at home or your wife at home. If you got kids that are in college, they came home. And now you got all these folks in your house. First of all, your house wasn't built for that. Second of all, your internet was not, your cable and your internet was not built for that. You got more crashes and everything because the internet really wasn't built for having 40-something million people on it at the same time.
Not the residential side. Right.
Exactly. We're not even talking the business side. So when you look at all of that, it created pressure. And, on the flip of that, you find that a lot of counselors are still very clinical and not personal. And what made us different as far as our counseling and consulting and coaching services is that when we started it, we were going to people's homes. And we were sitting with them in their environment and trying to give them, create an environment for them to deal with their issues. And then when COVID hit, we were already doing virtual, but we were doing even more. So we were, we're from New York to California. We're from Alaska to the UK, and how we serve people. And I do it all from the confines of my office at my house. So, God afforded me the opportunity to do what the word said, which said that he would not come until the word was able to be presented to all the corners of the world. But we have to understand that Christ was a teacher. And so if Christ was a teacher, his message really was, until you're able to teach what I mean to all the corners of the world, I will not come. And so through our counseling, we've been able to teach and exemplify Christ to the people that we serve. We go through a service, and on that service, we have over 50 reviews. We probably have the highest reviews of any of the other counselors within that service. And all of them have been between 4.9 and 5.0. Of a 5-star deal. And it's because we're personal, because we tell people that it's a ministry, it's not just a job. We like getting paid, but that's not our goal. And because it's not our goal, we've been blessed. And so not only do we do the services across the country and across the world, but we're also able to support churches in Africa. We support 2 churches in Africa, one in Liberia, one in Uganda, to help them not only through COVID, but to help with the orphan children in those countries due to war, Ebola, and AIDS. many kids are without parents, and so we're working with churches there, and we support them if we can financially, and then also domestically, we work with a program that helps kids that are in historically Black colleges and universities to stay in school through gift cards, gas cards, care packages, so we support an organization that does that. So I tell people when you work with us, you help us to work with the world, and you help us to educate our kids. And so those are the two mandates that we have within our organization, and we've been blessed to be able to help many people.
I just love what you're doing and how you are really and truly carrying out the mandate. So many times you hear people say that they want to be kingdom builders, but then when you ask them what are they doing, they're not doing anything, or they're doing just such basic, nothing that makes them stretch, nothing that makes them think outside of the box to make sure that even more people are reached. And it definitely sounds like not only is your heart in it, but those that work with you, that they are definitely of the same mindset. And that is a beautiful, beautiful thing to hear. Congratulations on working with the churches that are in Africa. That is thinking outside of the box and really expounding your boundaries. So that is a beautiful thing. Well, Pastor, it is time for us to go to break. But before we do, can you remind everyone again, what is the title of your book? Where can we pick up a copy? And how do we stay in contact with you?
Sure. The title of the book is The Miracles of Jesus, The Process for Community Building Through Kingdom Expansion. And you can find me on social media on Facebook by Devin Miller, and it's Devin. Devin is in, not on. And you can also find us through our church page, Clear Faith Christian Ministries, COGIC. And you can also find us for our counseling services on Clear Faith Christian Counseling, Consulting, and Coaching Services, also on Facebook.
Alrighty, everyone. Now you know where you can pick up a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this.
Hi everyone, Dr. Angela here. Did you know that Daily Spark is now on Facebook? That's right, you can visit with me at facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I want to know more about what you're thinking. I'd love to know which interview did you find the most entertaining or the most informative. I want to talk to you, and I want you to be able to talk to me. Simply visit facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. Discovery, not just a second.
What would it look like if we listened more? Could the right voice, the right set of words, bring us all just a little closer? Get us to open up, even push us further? It could, if we took the time to listen. The most inspiring minds, the most compelling stories. Download Audible and listen for a change.
What a crazy year it has been. Anyone out there feeling just a little bit lost right now? Well, no problem. Join me in learning how we can turn fear into confidence that creates cash. I'm a part of a series that helps everyone pivot during these times of uncertainty. Simply visit helpmepivot.com and access this free mastermind that includes not only myself, but international experts sharing their secrets on how to turn this time into a time of opportunity. Simply visit helpmepivot.com.
And we are back. Thank you so much for spending some time with with me here today on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. My guest today is Reverend Devin Miller. He is a pastor. He is an author. He is a coach, a counselor, and let me tell you, he is on fire for the Lord. So I love it, and I'm so happy to have him on the show today. His book is The Miracles of Jesus, and we have been talking about being kingdom-minded today. So I hope that you are enjoying your time, that we are inspiring, enlightening, and empowering you today. Well, Pastor, my next question for you is, and it's slightly a broad question, so I will let you narrow it however you choose. And the question is this: what is the state of the church today? What is going on with the church?
Well, Doctor, I think where the church is that the church is back at its original position of really meeting the heartfelt and the felt needs of the physical felt needs of its people. And I say that because COVID and the quarantine and the pandemic caused all of us to be isolated from each other, and yet we had to figure out how to connect.
Yeah.
I saw a conference call with Jamal Harrison Bryant, R.A. Vernon, Dewey Smith, and Rudolph McKissick and Walker, J.W. Walker of the Full Gospel Baptist Fellowship. And these are 5 major mega churches. And they were all saying that because of the pandemic, we have now been reduced from the mega church to being pastors.
Yeah.
And I thought that was very profound because they've had to, one, reevaluate how they minister. They had to reevaluate how they meet the needs of their people. They had to touch their people in a very different way. It wasn't them coming into the church, but it was them going into their homes through social media and through the internet. And then finally, they had to look at the staff and things that they had and say, if you can't think outside the box, why do I have you on my staff? And so I looked at that and I said, that's where a lot of small pastors have been since they started church, is that they had to be the pastor, they had to be the shepherd, they had to be the counselor, they had to be all of these things. But the introduction of the internet back 20 some odd years ago created a rift within the church, making the small pastor think he had to be like the big pastor. And thought he had to have, a social media ministry and all of this, when his calling may not have been to that. His calling may have been to minister to 50 people. But because he saw a mega church like a T.D. Jakes and those that I mentioned, he was like, oh, well, if God is irrespective of person, why am I not being blessed like that? And so we lost sight of our call and we started looking at our cause. And because we started looking at our cause, we lost sight of community. And because of that, God has a way through 2 Chronicles 7:14 of getting your attention. If my people who are called by my name would humble themselves and pray, seek my face, turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, then will I forgive their sin, and then will I heal the land. Well, the pandemic came along. We never saw it before. Didn't know how it was going to affect us. It cut the economy. It cut the church. It cut people. And it made us return to our homes and seek God like never before. I never saw more praying. I never saw more people coming together talking about what we're going to do than ever before. And it's because we lost our first love, as it says in Revelation. We lost our first love, which was God. And so I think the role of the church and the state of the church today is that we have to once again reinvent ourselves to meet the needs of the people. Now all of us are on the same playing field. We're using the same system or the same service, Zoom, Skype, whatever, to reach the people. Now, the thing the shift also is now you can't depend on people hooping, hollering, and yelling back at you to give a message. Now you've got to go deep into the word and teach, which is the mandate of all of us as pastors. When you look at the fivefold ministry, the last one says pastor teacher. It doesn't just say pastor, then teacher. It says pastor, teacher. And so when you understand that, then you have to understand not only are you to shepherd the people, but you're also to feed the people with the word of God. And so one of the things that Bishop McKissick said is my homiletics and my hermeneutics had to change because now I don't get the roar of the crowd. Yeah. Now it's just me and the computer, which means I've got to get excited about the word myself. And that's where God always wanted us to be.
I love it. I laughed there because some of my ministry friends and I, we were just talking about the same thing and how if that's what fed you, if you were just preaching for the accolade, then you are in a very lonely place right now.
Exactly.
And that we do need to make sure that that wasn't the reason why we wanted to be in front of people. So you said a mouthful there, and it made me think about when you were saying that. So many times people think, and I'm going to back out a little bit and not necessarily just talk about pastors, but give a very global view. When you say that there were so many people that had a smaller context and they were trying to be like the person that they thought had this very large context. We find so many times that when we look at the situation of our global community, there were so many people trying to be like other nations. There were smaller nations trying to be like other nations. And those other nations weren't necessarily leading us on a righteous path. They weren't necessarily taking us in a place that we needed to go. So thank you for saying that. And now this is such a time for everyone, like you said, to hit that reset button and to really see, is that the way that we really want it to go? And perhaps it was not the way we want it to go, and we need to get back on our path. Such a profound answer there. I love it. I love it. Now, in your opinion, do you think that the church will ever be the same? Now, we use the phrase a new normal. Do you think that this new normal that we have will be a good thing for the church?
It is a hope that it would be. I'm an eternal optimist in anything that happens, but I think we do not see church still as kingdom. We still see it as fiefdom, or we still see it as silos. And so my fear is that, we will go through this for maybe another year with the purpose of trying to get back to what we used to have, as opposed to sticking with where we are and transforming so that we can become better. I see that in the same vein as the unrest that we are currently experiencing. We don't have staying power. We have hashtag power, and I'm afraid that if we don't stick and stay, we will be here again. And history proves that if you what the saying is that if you continue to do the same thing and expect different results, that's the definition of insanity. And I think what we're seeing is the regurgitation time and again of this civil unrest paradigm without any results. And that's why we continue to do it, because we don't know how to do anything after the march. We keep wanting to march, but we don't know how to sit down. We don't know how to take out pen, pad, notebook, iPad, laptop, or whatever, and say, okay, what is it exactly that we want? And so now God has a way, and I've said this, I've been through, I should say, every single unrest that we've had. Going all the way back to Trayvon Martin. And I said, even then, if we do not transform ourselves, we will be back here again. And it played itself out with Eric Garner, Tamar Rice. I can name them the list, because we did not understand why it was happening. And the reason it was happening was, and this may not be popular, but I'll say it anyway. Why would you want your oppressor to love you when he never intended to love you in the first place? And when I say oppressor, I'm not talking about people. I'm talking about power structures. I'm talking about systems. These systems were never made for us as a people. But just as the children of Israel continue to work and persevere, African American people and people of African descent have continued to persevere. And why? Because they were a spiritual people. And so you have to ask yourself, what have we gotten away from? We have gotten away from our roots. If we get back to our foundation, which is God, and we start to love ourselves, respect ourselves, appreciate ourselves, buy from ourselves, sell to ourselves, and do all the things for ourselves, not in alienation of anyone else, but in total love of who we are, then we will see a change in other people, because the first law of living is self-preservation. And we have not preserved ourselves, and we're asking someone else to preserve us when we are not even doing it for ourselves. When we get excited, when we get as much enraged about black on black crime as much as we do police on black crime, then we will see a change.
I think it is absolutely important that we do take a moment to do this differently. And I think that everyone has had that conversation, at least on the news programming that I've watched. A bit of that conversation has been had, that this feels different because the world is viewing this differently. Like you were saying, we've taken a moment to say, wait a minute. For people who didn't believe the first time or the 100th time that people said it, they have now seen it for themselves, and their paradigms have shifted, or perhaps they just found that this one was just the most appalling, and they cannot imagine how much further this could go. And you are so right. We have to make a change, not only as individuals, but we have to make a change as a world as a whole. I love it. Now, Pastor, we have about a minute left in the show, and I want to give you an opportunity. If there isn't anything that I asked, or if there's something that you would like to share on, just giving us some wit and wisdom, the floor is yours for the next minute.
Well, first of all, let me thank you, Doctor, for this opportunity to share on your show and with your audience the purpose, the process, and the power of the book. Let me also say that the book is not just the answer. The true answer is in our finding ourselves in God. And finding out specifically what it is that he has for us. And so I encourage your listeners to not only buy the book, but also utilize the book as much as we are supposed to utilize the Bible. And the Bible is the basic instructions before leaving Earth. And so this book is a part of that process, so that we can become all that God wants us to be, so that when we show our relationship with him and we reconcile unto him, then it's very easy for us to reconcile to one another.
I love it. Thank you so much, Pastor Miller, Reverend Devin Miller. Thank you for coming on and being with me today.
Thank you.
And listeners, we want to thank you as well for spending some of your day here with us as well. As always, may the Lord continue to shine his face upon you. May you receive his grace and his mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.